The marble floor catches the light wrong. That's the first thing that registers. The chandelier above throws diamonds across stone that's still wet with something that's smoking. The smell hits next. Olive oil burned past its breaking point, mixed with something else. Fear maybe. Fear has a smell. It tastes like copper and sweat, and the moment right before a person realizes they can't take something back. Hot oil sizzles against marble. The sound keeps going even though the pan has already fallen to the floor. The oil keeps moving, keeps spreading, droplets scattering like shattered glass. Each one a tiny burn waiting to happen. Alara Nichols stands in the center of the Moreau kitchen. Though everyone in this mansion knows it's really hers, belongs to her the way everything in a house belongs to the woman sleeping beside the boss. Her uniform is soaked, red and white cotton clinging to her skin. Her left arm is already turning red, not a dark red, a bright, painful red that means the burn is going to hurt worse in about 30 seconds. But she's not looking at her arm. She's looking at Vivian. The words come out as a whisper, but the whisper carries weight. The kind of weight that makes grown men stop moving. You should have never touched me. The room stops breathing. Vivian DuPont stands 3 feet away, her silk robe torn at the shoulder. The robe costs more than most people's monthly rent. It was pale blue this morning. Now it has a burn mark the size of a serving spoon, and underneath the mark, there's skin that's starting to blister. Her wrist is shaking, not trembling like weakness, shaking like electricity is running through her bones. Her face is the kind of face that was built in another country by surgeons who charge by the smile. Perfect bones, perfect skin, perfect everything, except for the moment right now where it's cracking. Not visibly cracking, but everyone in the room can see it anyway. The system that keeps Vivian DuPont standing tall is breaking down. The certainty that made her untouchable is dissolving like salt in water. Hi viewers, I want to ask you something real quick before we continue. Tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it where you are? I want to know who's tuning in from around the world. This story gets better if I know who's listening. Because here's what matters in the next few seconds. The guards in white shirts and dark suits react first. There are 4 of them standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the corridor. They move toward Alara at the exact same moment. Hands reaching, protocols activating. This is what they've been trained for. The moment when order breaks down and someone needs to be removed from the equation. But they stop. All 4 of them just stop. Like someone hit pause on the room because of what they see in the doorway behind them. Silvio Ravanelli fills a space the way gravity does. He doesn't take up more room than anybody else. He just makes everyone else feel smaller. The man is bald. Not bald like he lost his hair. Bald like he decided hair was unnecessary. His head reflects the light from the chandelier like polished stone. His left temple carries a scar that runs from his hairline to his cheekbone. The scar looks like someone tried to erase him once. Didn't work. Tattoos map his history across his olive skin. Prison time in Rome. Connections in Naples. Blood spilled in places that don't get mentioned in newspapers. His eyes are the color of polished steel. Dark steel. The kind that's been used for things that matter. He's wearing a tailored black suit, even though it's early morning. The suit costs more than a luxury car. The watch on his wrist costs more than the suit. His shoes are Italian leather. Everything about Silvio Ravanelli says money. Everything about him also says that money is not the thing that gives him power. He doesn't move when he enters the kitchen. He just stands in the doorway, watching. His breathing is steady. His shoulders are relaxed. His face looks like someone carved it from stone and then forgot to add expression. But his eyes are moving. They're taking inventory. The oil on the floor. The pan. Vivian's burned robe. Alara's burned arm. The fear in the guards' bodies. The certainty in Alara's voice when she said those 6 words. Behind Silvio, standing to his left, is a woman in a black dress. She's beautiful in a different way than Vivian. Where Vivian is ice, this woman is steel wrapped in velvet. She's covering her mouth. Not like she's shocked. Like she's seen power reversals before and she knows exactly what's about to happen. She's seen the moment when the servant becomes the threat and the boss realizes he has to choose which one he believes. Silvio still hasn't moved. He hasn't spoken. The silence in the kitchen is the kind of silence that makes people want to scream just to break it. Vivian's breath catches. The oil on the marble keeps sizzling. The burn on her wrist is getting worse. Her eyes are moving between Silvio and Alara like she's watching a tennis match, and both players are about to hit her in the face. She starts to speak. Her voice is beautiful, practiced, and perfect. "Sir, I can explain. She came at me. She was threatening me. I was simply defending myself, But Silvio doesn't acknowledge her. His eyes are fixed on Alara, this quiet maid, this girl in the too big uniform who's been working in his mansion for exactly 23 days. The girl who's never spoken unless spoken to. The girl who everyone assumed was just part of the furniture. His eyes don't move away from her, and that's when Alara understands something that changes everything. This man just realized he doesn't actually know who she is. He thought he knew. He thought she was one thing. And now, in this moment, standing in his kitchen with oil burning on his marble and her arm turning red and her voice steady as concrete, he's understanding that every assumption he made was wrong. For the first time in his life, Silvio Ravanelli doesn't know who the real threat actually is. And that realization is going to burn hotter than any oil ever could. If you're already hooked by this story, smash that like button right now, because trust me when I say this is about to get absolutely wild. We're just getting started, and everything you think you know about what's happening in this kitchen is wrong. Subscribe now, so you don't miss what Alara reveals in the next chapter, because it's going to change absolutely everything you just witnessed. Trust me on this. The Ravanelli mansion was built by a man who understood one thing about power. It lives in symmetry. Every corridor runs the exact same length. Every wall reflects light the exact same way. The marble floors were imported from Carrara, which means they cost more than blood ever should. The chandeliers hang like frozen explosions, thousands of crystals that catch light and throw it back into the room at angles that make people feel like they're being watched from above. They are. The security cameras are invisible, but Alara found them on her third day. 23 of them. 23 different angles covering every room except the bedrooms and bathrooms. The system is state-of-the-art, which means it was installed by someone who had things to hide and money to spend hiding them. The air in the mansion carries the weight of secrets. It smells like imported cigars and money, and the particular kind of perfume that costs more than a car payment. There's a tension underneath the beauty. The kind of tension that exists in places where people have learned that saying the wrong word can end your life. Everything in this house is monitored, controlled, designed to look perfect while hiding the fact that something underneath is completely wrong. Vivian DuPont moved through these hallways like she owned the oxygen itself. 3 weeks before the oil hit the marble, before the burn mark appeared on her wrist, before anything went wrong, Vivian walked through the mansion like she was auditioning for a role she'd already won. Her heels clicked against the stone. Each click was deliberate. Each click was meant to remind the staff that she was present, that she was watching, that their jobs depended on her mood. She wore Chanel on Mondays, Dior on Wednesdays, on the nights when Silvio hosted his business associates, men in suits who smiled like predators and spoke in languages designed to confuse. She wore custom Italian silk that moved when she moved but never wrinkled. Her hair was never out of place. Her makeup was applied with surgical precision. Her smile was so practiced that nobody could tell the difference between genuine and weaponized. She was 31 years old. She looked 25. Neither of those facts was an accident. Before she came to the Ravanelli mansion, Vivian auditioned for theater productions in Rome. Small roles. Forgettable productions. One time, she played the sister of the dead brother. Another time, she played the wife in a murder mystery that closed after 4 performances. She had talent, but talent wasn't enough. Talent never is enough. You need money. You need connections. You need the kind of luck that looks like coincidence, but tastes like calculation. She found Silvio Ravanelli at a charity gala in Florence. He was standing alone in a corner, watching the room. His suit was expensive. His watch was a Patek Philippe. His face looked like it had been cut from stone and then left in the sun too long. He looked dangerous. He looked powerful. He looked like someone who could open doors that were supposed to stay closed. She walked up to him and didn't say anything, just stood beside him and looked at the room the way he was looking at it. 3 minutes of silence. Then he turned to her and asked a question that changed her entire life. "What's your name?" Vivian understood that question. It wasn't really a question. It was an audition. She was being tested to see if she understood the difference between talking and saying something that mattered. She told him her name. 3 months later, she moved into the Ravenelli mansion. Nobody called her wife. Nobody called her fiancé. There was no title that covered what she was. She was Silvio's woman, which meant she had access, which meant she had power, which meant that every staff member in the mansion treated her like she was royalty with a gun. But a gun is only powerful when people believe you'll use it. Silvio Ravenelli was different. He didn't need anyone to believe he'd use a gun. Silvio just existed, and everyone else adjusted their lives around his presence. The man was bald by choice, not circumstance. His body was covered in tattoos that told stories nobody was brave enough to ask about. His left temple carried a scar from his hairline to his cheekbone. The scar looked like someone had tried to kill him and almost succeeded. He moved through the mansion like he was walking through rooms that he'd already seen 100 times. No rush, no hesitation, just absolute certainty that the space would rearrange itself to accommodate his body. When Silvio spoke, the world got quiet. Not because he was loud, because he was so quiet that people had to stop moving just to hear him. His men called a boss. The newspapers called him a businessman. His bank account said he owned import-export companies that moved goods through ports from Naples to Amsterdam. His actual work was something else entirely. Something that required loyalty. Absolute loyalty. The kind of loyalty that asked a man to forget his own name if the boss required it. In Silvio's world, betrayal was death. Not as a punishment. As a logical consequence. You betray the system removes you. The rules were written in blood. They were unwritten but absolute. The servants knew them by heart. Never look the boss in the eye unless he looks at you first. Never speak unless spoken to. Never, ever suggest that the woman sleeping beside him was anything less than the center of his universe. Never question. Never doubt. Never allow your face to show what you're actually thinking. The mansion operated on a system of perfect performance. Until a girl named Alara Nichols arrived on a Tuesday morning carrying false papers and a burn of hatred in her chest that made everything else in her seem small and insignificant. The head housekeeper, a woman named Marissa who'd worked in the mansion for 17 years and had never made a mistake that Silvio cared about, submitted the paperwork to hire her. References checked out. Background was clean. Previous employment at the Accardi estate had been verified by a phone call to someone who didn't actually exist. Silvio never questioned it. Marissa had never lied to him before. On Alara's first day, Vivian tested her in the dressing room. The dressing room was the size of most apartments. Mirrors covered 3 walls. The lighting was designed by someone who understood that a woman's face should look perfect from every angle at all times. The closet held clothes that cost more than tuition at private universities. The shoes alone could have paid for a year of therapy. Vivian wore a white robe over her body. She was getting ready for a charity gala that evening. She'd already been to the salon. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was already done. The robe was just something to wear while she decided which dress to display that night. She looked at Alara like she was looking at a problem that needed solving. "You'll clean this room every morning before I wake up," Vivian said. Her voice was beautiful. "Honey mixed with arsenic. You'll touch nothing. You'll look at nothing. You'll speak only if I ask you a direct question. Do you understand?" Alara nodded. "Words," Vivian said. "I want to hear you use them." "Yes, ma'am," Alara whispered. "Good. The last maid who looked at me with anything other than perfect deference doesn't work here anymore." "Do you know why?" Alara shook her head. "Because I decided she wasn't necessary anymore. And I'm the one who decides what's necessary in this house. Not Silvio, not the guards. Me. I'm the one who actually runs this place. I'm the one who decides if people stay or go. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good girl. Then we'll get along just fine." Over the first week, Vivian tested Alara constantly. She'd spill coffee on purpose and then blame the maid for not moving fast enough. She'd criticize the way Alara folded clothes, the way she arranged flowers, the the way she breathed in the room. Nothing was ever done right. Nothing was ever going to be good enough. But Alara never fought back. Alara never complained. Alara never let her face show what she was actually thinking. Alara just endured it, day after day, hour after hour. The quiet acceptance drove Vivian crazy in a way that anger never could have. Because Vivian had built her entire life on the idea that she could make people react, that she could control them through fear or desire or the perfect mixture of both. And Alara's silence was a wall. Solid, impenetrable, impossible to break. Then came the morning that changed everything. 2 weeks into working at the mansion, Alara had a routine that never varied. She woke at 5 in the morning. She showered in the small bathroom attached to the staff quarters. She dressed in a uniform that was deliberately too large, a choice that cost her hours of extra work but served a purpose. Looking smaller made her less threatening. Looking less threatening meant fewer questions about who she actually was. By 5:30, she was in the kitchen. The kitchen at 6 in the morning was a place of silence. The sun hadn't risen yet. The guards were rotating shifts. The house was still sleeping. This was the only time that Alara could move through the mansion without being watched by at least 3 different camera angles and a minimum of 2 security personnel. The morning of the incident that would change everything, Alara was wiping down the marble counters. The stone was already gleaming. She was wiping it anyway. Repetition created patterns. Patterns created invisibility. She'd learned that in her training. The training that lasted 3 years. The training that taught her to move through houses like she was part of the fixtures. To clean in ways that revealed information. Which rooms had hidden safes, which paintings covered wall panels, which books on the shelves were actually door mechanisms disguised as literature. She was learning the architecture of power. Silvio Ravanelli came into the kitchen at 6:15. This was unusual. Silvio didn't come into kitchens. Silvio didn't enter spaces where food was prepared. That was beneath him. That was what staff existed for. But on this morning, he was leaving early. A meeting that couldn't wait. Business that required his presence somewhere else. He was moving with the particular kind of urgency that came from being a man accustomed to having everyone else's schedule organized around his own. He didn't look at Alara. He just passed through the kitchen toward the exit door that led to the garage. His phone was in his hand. His driver was probably already waiting outside. His suit was pressed so hard it looked like it could cut through paper. Alara didn't change her movement. She kept wiping the counter, kept her head down, kept her presence invisible. Then Silvio stopped. He turned back. And the only thing he said, the only words that came out of his mouth in that moment, were 2 words that would become the spark that burned Vivian Dupont alive from the inside. Thank you. That was it. Just 2 words. Simple words. The kind of words that people say so automatically they don't really mean them. Thank you. Like someone thanking the barista for their coffee. Like someone thanking the cashier for bagging their groceries. But Silvio never thanked anyone. That was fact. The staff knew it. The guards knew it. Everyone in the mansion had learned long ago that gratitude was not a currency Silvio traded in. You did your job. You did it well. You didn't do it so you could receive a thank you. You did it because the alternative was ceasing to exist. Silvio walked out of the kitchen. Alara finished wiping the counter. Neither of them said another word. But by noon, Vivian Dupont knew something had shifted. She could taste it in the air. She could feel it in the way that Silvio moved through the mansion, slightly different than he had before. Slightly more aware, slightly more present. She sat on her bed and constructed a narrative in her mind the way she constructed everything, with precision and absolute certainty that her version of reality was the only version that mattered. He'd noticed Alara, that quiet maid with the soft hands and the gentle voice. He'd noticed her, and Vivian understood exactly what that meant. She'd been in enough dangerous situations to recognize the moment when the ground started shifting underneath her feet. By evening, she decided what she would do about it. By the next morning, the campaign had begun. Small things at first. A coffee cup knocked over. Water spilled on Alara's shirt. A shift added to the schedule that hadn't been there before. Nothing that would raise flags. Nothing that would bring Silvio's attention or the guard's suspicion. Just enough to make Alara understand that she wasn't as invisible as she thought. Just enough to remind the girl that she existed in a mansion where one woman's jealousy was more powerful than any man's rules. The days became weeks. Vivian's attention never wavered. Every morning, she found new ways to remind Alara that she didn't belong. Every evening, she waited to see if the girl would complain, would break, would finally ask for protection or acknowledgement or anything that would prove she was human enough to need help. But Alara never broke. She just kept moving through the mansion, cleaning, organizing, becoming more invisible by the day, until the moment when her invisibility became dangerous, until the moment when Vivian couldn't take it anymore, until the morning when a frying pan filled with hot oil became the only language that Vivian knew how to speak. And everything that came before was just prologue. Jealousy in the world of organized crime is a luxury that costs blood. But in Vivian's world, it was fuel. It was oxygen. It was the thing that woke her up in the morning and kept her moving through the day with absolute clarity about what she needed to accomplish. That moment in the kitchen when Silvio said, "Thank you," to Alara had planted something inside Vivian. Something that grew. Something that multiplied. Something that became her entire focus within 72 hours. She stopped sleeping. Actually stopped. She'd lie beside Silvio in a bed that was bigger than most studio apartments and just watch his chest move up and down in the darkness. In her mind, she was playing that moment on repeat. His voice saying those words. His eyes lingering on the counter that Alara had cleaned. His attention shifting just slightly in a direction that wasn't toward her. 3 years she'd been with him. 3 years of orchestrating every charity gala with surgical precision. 3 years of smiling at the wives of his rivals and pretending to care about their boring conversations about interior designers and vacation homes. 3 years of maintaining the fiction that she was content to exist in his shadow. And he'd never thanked her. Not once. But a girl who he'd known for 2 weeks? A maid who was supposed to be invisible? She received gratitude like it was owed to her. By the time the sun came up the next morning, Vivian had constructed an entire mythology in her mind. She'd built a story that made complete sense to her. That quiet look Alara had given when she cleaned the counter. The way she positioned her body to catch Silvio's attention. The seduction happening so quietly that nobody else could even see it yet. This wasn't a maid being grateful for employment. This was a calculated move. This was someone trying to manipulate her way up the ladder by making the boss think she was special. Different. Worthy of thanks. Vivian understood exactly what that meant. It meant war. The first skirmish happened in the morning room, where Vivian took her coffee and read the news on a tablet that cost more than a used car. She'd called for Alara to bring her breakfast. The girl had come with a tray that held eggs and fresh fruit and pastries from the bakery in the village. Nothing was wrong with the tray. Nothing was wrong with the food. Everything was exactly right, which was the problem. Vivian looked at the tray and then looked at Alara, and she said, "I don't eat eggs that are cut that way. You've ruined my entire morning." She knocked the tray, not hard enough to cause real damage, just hard enough to scatter the eggs across the floor and make a point. The pastries fell, the juice spilled, the entire breakfast dissolved into chaos on the marble tile. Alara just looked at it. "Clean it up," Vivian said, "and do better next time." That was day 1. Day 2, Vivian discovered a wrinkle in one of Alara's bed linens and made the girl remake the entire bed while she watched, narrating every mistake with the precision of a critic who'd been waiting their entire life for this opportunity to destroy someone's confidence. Day 3, she overheard Alara humming while cleaning and told her that her voice sounded like an animal dying in a ditch, and that she should probably just stay silent all the time if this was what happens when she tries to express herself. Day 4, she made a point to mention to the other staff members, when she knew Alara was close enough to hear, but far enough away to pretend she didn't, that she was considering asking Silvio to replace the new girl because she wasn't working out. But Alara never reacted. Not once. She never cried. She never complained. She never looked for sympathy or protection or any kind of acknowledgement that what was happening to her was wrong. She just kept moving through the mansion, kept cleaning, kept working, kept existing in a way that was so quiet and so steady that it drove Vivian absolutely insane. Because Vivian had built her entire life on the idea that she could control people through fear. That if you pushed hard enough, people would break. People would cry. People would eventually do exactly what you wanted them to do just to make the pain stop. But Alara's silence was different. Alara's silence wasn't weakness. Alara's silence was a wall. Solid, immovable, made of something that Vivian couldn't penetrate no matter how hard she pushed. And that silence had become the most infuriating thing in the entire mansion. By the end of the second week, Vivian wasn't sleeping anymore. She was obsessing, replaying conversations, imagining scenarios where she confronted both Silvio and Alara, constructing narratives where the girl admitted to trying to seduce the boss. She'd lose hours staring at the ceiling. She'd drink wine at midnight and tell herself it was helping her relax. She'd walk through the mansion in the evening and watch how Silvio moved through rooms, trying to catch him looking at Alara, try to find evidence of something that she was constructing entirely inside her own mind. The jealousy became a living thing. It had teeth. It had hunger. It consumed her from the inside the way acid consumes metal. And by the end of the third week, Vivian had made a decision that would crack the entire foundation of her life into pieces. She was going to remove the problem. Not permanently. She wasn't going to kill the girl or have her killed. This wasn't a situation where Silvio's men would need to get involved. This was something that Vivian would handle herself. Something that would prove to Silvio exactly who was actually in charge of this mansion. She was going to pour hot oil on a maid in his kitchen, and she was going to smile while she did it. And she was going to tell him that it was an accident, and nobody was going to question a word she said, because Vivian DuPont knew how to lie the way other people knew how to breathe. It was going to be easy. She had no idea how wrong she was about that. She had no idea that the girl she was about to attack with hot oil had spent the last 3 years training for exactly this moment. She had no idea that Alara Nichols wasn't actually a maid at all. 7 years and 3 months before Alara walked into the Ravenelli mansion, a man named Marcus Nichols was driving a truck through a country road outside Naples when his brake line failed. The official report said mechanical failure. A worn brake line. Simple negligence during routine maintenance. The truck went off the road at 80 kilometers per hour. It rolled. It caught fire. It burned with enough intensity that the identification process took dental records. Marcus Nichols was dead before his body ever hit the flames. His daughter was 17 years old. Her name was Alara Nichols, and she found out that her father was dead when 2 police officers showed up at her school and asked her to come into the hallway. She remembered every detail about that moment. The color of the walls, the sound of a bell ringing for a class change, the specific way that the first officer looked at the second officer before delivering news that would destroy her entire universe. The funeral was small. Marcus's work contacts didn't show up. The people he'd built his logistics company with suddenly developed reasons why they couldn't attend. His employees were already taking jobs with other companies. His reputation was being erased from the industry like he'd never existed at all. Alara stood at his graveside and held a photograph of her father and tried to understand how a man could vanish this completely the moment he wasn't alive anymore to defend his own legacy. It took her 3 weeks of searching through her father's files to find the connection. It took her 2 more months to trace the paperwork backwards far enough to see the pattern. A shell company, fraudulent debt claims, documents that made it look like Marcus's logistics business was hemorrhaging money and was in danger of complete collapse. The paperwork was so elaborate, so professional, so meticulously crafted that even Marcus believed it at first. He'd gone to the bank trying to get a loan to cover the debt. The bank denied him. He tried to reach out to business partners. They suddenly had no time for his calls. His credit rating had been destroyed. His company was being seized to cover debt that didn't actually exist. One of the documents in his files was a signature. Vivian DuPont's signature on a verification form that made the fraudulent debt claims look legitimate. That signature was the key. Alara was sitting in a library in Rome when she realized that her father's death wasn't an accident. That brake line hadn't worn on its own. That truck hadn't rolled because of mechanical failure. Someone had cut it. Someone had decided that Marcus Nichols was a problem that needed solving. And someone, a woman with a signature and a face and a name, had made it legal. Alara left school. She moved into a small apartment in a part of Rome that tourists never saw. She found work cleaning houses, not because she needed the money, because she needed to learn how to move through spaces without being noticed, because she needed to understand the architecture of wealth and power from the inside. She spent a year in that apartment, cleaning houses, taking online courses, building a new identity out of false documents and patience and absolute certainty about what she was going to do. By the time she was 18, she'd become someone else entirely. By the time she was 20, she could pick locks, crack safes, move through security systems like they were invisible. She'd learned languages. Italian was easy, she already spoke it. French came next, then German, then English in an accent that could shift depending on what region she wanted to sound like she came from. She was building herself into a weapon pointed at Silvio Ravanelli and Vivian Dupont. The search for Silvio took longer than she expected. Vivian Dupont had a public profile, photos, social media, a biography that could be traced. But Silvio Ravanelli operated in shadows. He was careful, he was professional, he left no trails. But Alara found them anyway. It took 3 years. The first thread was a business connection. Silvio had purchased property through the shell company that had destroyed Marcus's business. The same shell company. This one detail was enough to give Alara direction. She followed property records. She followed financial transactions. She found the connection to organized crime that wasn't spoken about in newspapers, but was whispered about in bars where people thought nobody was listening. By the time Alara was 23, she had an entire file on Silvio Ravanelli. His operations, his network, his properties, everything she needed to understand how to get close to him. The Ravanelli mansion became her target. The job posting for a new Maid showed up on a service that she'd been monitoring for exactly that reason. The salary was acceptable. The position was real. The building was the place where Silvio lived. Alara created a new identity named Alara Nichols. Same first name, different last name. With perfectly forged references and a background that would withstand the kind of security check that Silvio would definitely run. She passed the interview. She was hired within a week. On her first day in the Ravanelli mansion, she didn't think about her father. She thought about why she was here, what she was here to accomplish. She thought about the USB drive hidden in a pocket sewn into the lining of her uniform. She thought about the documents she'd already copied and encrypted and prepared to send to 3 different news outlets the moment everything was ready. She was here to end an empire. She was here to prove that Silvio Ravanelli wasn't untouchable. She was here to make sure that Vivian Dupont paid for that signature. Everything else, Vivian's jealousy, Silvio's small moments of kindness, the way her own heart sometimes felt like it was breaking while she endured the humiliation of pretending to be invisible. All of that was just part of the operation. She was building toward something. She was moving toward a moment when everything would crash. She just didn't know yet that the moment would arrive in exactly 7 days, in a kitchen filled with hot oil and witnesses, when the woman she hated most would finally lose her mind and try to hurt her. And when that moment came, Alara was ready. She'd been ready for 3 years. All she had to do was catch the moment on the security cameras and press send on the messages that were already queued and waiting. All she had to do was transform revenge into exposure. All she had to do was become the storm that destroyed everything Vivian Dupont had built. And when she did, nobody would ever believe that a quiet maid in a red and white uniform was the person who'd torn down the empire from the inside. But she was going to do it anyway, and she was going to do it in exactly 7 days, and she was going to do it in a way that meant Vivian Dupont would never recover from the moment it happened. That's when the truth arrives. That's when everything changes. That's the moment we've been building toward. And if you're ready to see what happens next, you need to watch the next chapter, because this story is about to shift into something completely different. Vivian's obsession is reaching its breaking point. And 7 days from now, she's going to make a choice that's going to cost her everything. Subscribe right now, so you don't miss the moment when Alara stops being invisible and becomes the most dangerous force in that mansion. The first time Silvio noticed something in Alara that made him stop moving was 3 in the morning. He couldn't sleep. His mind was running through financial reports and supply chain logistics, and the particular kind of mathematics that comes with moving money through channels that don't officially exist. He'd left his bed without waking Vivian. He was moving through the east corridor toward the library when he heard it. Humming. The sound was coming from the hallway. A melody that he hadn't heard in decades. A melody that belonged to someone who'd been dead for 23 years. His sister used to hum it, before everything got broken, before his father taught him that family was a liability and sentimentality was the fastest way to get yourself killed, before the world taught him that love was just another name for weakness. Alara was cleaning the baseboards in her nightgown. Her uniform was hanging in the staff quarters somewhere. She was cleaning in a simple cotton gown that was faded from too many washings. Her hands were moving along the marble trim with practiced precision. She was humming because she probably thought nobody was awake. Because at 3 in the morning, she probably believed she was alone. Silvio watched her from the shadows for 30 seconds before she noticed his presence. When she looked up, her body went rigid. She understood what she'd done. She'd made noise. She'd drawn attention. In a mansion where attention was dangerous, she'd broken the primary rule. "Where did you learn that?" Silvio asked. Alara's hands froze on her cloth. Her breath changed. He could see her calculating, trying to find an answer that wouldn't result in her termination. "My father," she said finally. "He used to hum it while he worked." Silvio felt something move inside his chest. Not emotion exactly. Something deeper than emotion. Something that moved like a door opening into rooms he'd sealed off years ago. "Keep humming," he said. "The house needs something pure." He walked away before she could respond. But everything about the mansion had shifted the moment those words left his mouth. By morning, Vivian felt it. She woke to find Silvio already gone. The pillow beside her was cold. He'd left early. He'd left without saying goodbye. He'd left in a way that suggested he was thinking about something else. Someone else. She knew immediately who. That quiet maid. That forgettable girl in the too big uniform. Something had happened. Something had changed the way Silvio moved through the world. Vivian spent the entire day constructing a new narrative. The girl had done something, said something, made herself seem vulnerable in a way that appealed to Silvio's psychological weakness. She'd manipulated him deliberately. By evening, Vivian's jealousy had evolved into something more dangerous. It had become certainty. The maid had to go, not just removed from the immediate vicinity, actually gone, from a mansion, from Silvio's awareness, from existing as a variable in Vivian's carefully constructed world. The week that followed was the longest week of Vivian's life. She watched how Silvio moved through rooms. She noticed when he paused at the kitchen entrance slightly longer than necessary. She observed the way his attention lingered on details. Fresh flowers rearranged by Alara, marble that gleamed because someone had taken extra time polishing it. Silvio wasn't falling in love. Vivian understood that much. Silvio didn't fall in love with people. Silvio recognized quality work and acknowledged it. But that acknowledgement was a betrayal. It meant the maid was becoming visible. It meant Alara was worming her way into Silvio's awareness the way that Vivian had worked her way in 3 years ago. The threat was real. By Friday morning, when Vivian woke to find Silvio already showering and preparing breakfast for himself instead of asking her to join him, she'd made her decision. She would cook breakfast herself. She would create a moment of intimacy that would remind Silvio why he'd chosen her in the first place. She would be beautiful and thoughtful and devoted. She would make him remember what it felt like to matter to someone. And she would ask Alara to help her. The kitchen at 8 in the morning was filled with steam and heat and the smell of expensive ingredients being transformed into something that looked like love. Vivian moved like a dancer. Her movements were calculated to be beautiful. She wore a silk robe the color of pale blue. Her hair was down instead of styled up. She was performing vulnerability and grace and the particular kind of feminine power that came from suggesting that you needed someone else's strength to survive. Alara arrived when summoned. She was wearing her uniform, the too big uniform that made her seem smaller than she was. Her hair was pulled back severely. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a servant waiting for instructions. "Help me with this," Vivian said, pointing to a pan of olive oil that was heating on the stove. Alara moved beside her. Vivian began chopping vegetables. She spoke about nothing: the weather, a new dress, a charity event planned for next month. Small talk designed to seem domestic, designed to seem normal. But underneath the small talk, Vivian was watching Alara's reactions, watching for any sign of attraction, any hint of the seduction that she was certain had occurred 3 days ago in the hallway at 3 in the morning. "You know what I've been thinking about?" Vivian's voice was honey and ice mixed together. Alara didn't respond. She was focused on the pan. "I've been thinking about how you look at him," Vivian continued. "How you arrange things so he'll notice them. How you make yourself seem vulnerable so he feels like he needs to protect you." "I don't know what you mean, ma'am," Alara said quietly. "Don't you?" Vivian's voice changed. The honey disappeared. Only ice remained. "You think I don't see it? The way he looks at you? The way he speaks to you? You think you can walk into my life in your pathetic uniform and steal what's mine?" Alara stepped back. "Ma'am, I'm only here to work." "I don't. You lie," Vivian said. Her voice was rising now. The beautiful performance was breaking down. "You lie every single day with that quiet act, that soft voice. That way you make yourself seem like you need protection. Men like Silvio protect things. They collect things. They own things. And you've decided you want to be one of his possessions instead of mine." She was gripping the pan handle now. Her knuckles were white. Her face was flushed. "I've demolished women for less than this," Vivian said. "Women with money. Women with families. Women who actually mattered. You're nothing. You're less than nothing. You're a trick, a seduction in an apron. And I'm going to remind you exactly where you stand in this house." She lifted the pan. The oil was sizzling. The temperature was exactly hot enough to cause maximum damage. For 1 second, the kitchen held its breath. Then Vivian swung. The oil moved through the air like a horizontal crescent of fire. The pan's movement was violent. The intention was clear. She was going to pour that oil directly onto Alara's face. Alara raised the metal tray she was holding. The oil struck it and splashed backward. The sound was violent. The smell was immediate. The steam erupted upward like something alive. The oil scattered across the marble floor and the counter in Vivian's hand. Vivian screamed, not a scream of pain, a scream of rage, a scream of realization, a scream that came from someone understanding that her own body had just betrayed her. The pan clattered to the floor. The guards rushed in simultaneously. They came through the kitchen entrance with weapons drawn and protocols activated. Their bodies moved with the efficiency of men who trained for exactly this scenario. 4 of them, all in white shirts and dark suits, all understanding that something in the power structure of the mansion had just shifted. Behind them, filling the doorway like gravity, stood Silvio. His expression didn't change. His eyes did. And in that moment, Silvio Ravanelli understood 3 things with absolute certainty. First, Vivian had attacked the maid. Second, the maid had blocked it without hesitation or fear. Third, the maid's eyes were looking directly at him with a clarity that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd faced danger. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on all your notifications because the next chapter is going to expose everything. We're about to reveal why Alara came to this mansion, what she's actually been doing here, and what happens when Silvio realizes that every assumption he made about the people in his life was absolutely wrong. This story is about to change your entire understanding of what's possible. Share this in the comments. Tell me what you think is about to happen. Tell me if you think Alara is in danger or if Vivian just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because the truth is coming and it's going to break everything. The guards didn't move. They stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, waiting for instruction. Their hands were steady. Their faces were blank. This was a moment that required their boss to speak first. Silvio still hadn't spoken. He was looking at Alara. She was covered in oil. Her arm was burned red. Her uniform was soaked, but her eyes were calm. Her breathing was steady. Her body was radiating something that the guards recognized immediately. She wasn't afraid. In a mansion where fear was the currency that kept the power structure intact, Alara Nichols was standing in the middle of chaos and looking completely steady. Vivian was crying now, not crying the way that she cried in performances, crying with genuine shock. Her wrist was burned. Her perfect silk robe was destroyed. She was looking at Silvio with an expression that suggested she expected him to do something, to protect her, to punish Alara, to restore order to the world. What the hell is going on? Silvio's voice was quiet enough that the guards had to lean in to hear it properly. Vivian started speaking immediately. Her words were tumbling over each other. She came at me. I was preparing breakfast and she launched. I was defending myself. She's insane. We need to call the police in. No, Silvio said. Everyone stopped moving. He was looking at Alara. His eyes hadn't moved from her face since he entered the kitchen. He was looking at her the way a man looks at something he's been trying to understand and is finally seeing clearly. He said, tell me the truth. Alara stood absolutely still. The oil was still dripping from her uniform. The burn on her arm was getting worse. She looked like she might collapse, but her voice was steady. She threw it first, sir, Alara said. I was defending myself. You're lying, Vivian screamed. She's lying. Look at my wrist. Look at my robe. She attacked me. She came at me with that tray like a weapon and... Silvio raised his hand. Vivian's words died like someone had strangled them mid-sentence. He turned to look at the floor. The oil had created a clear pattern. It had splashed backward from something solid, not forward from a pan held by someone attacking. The angle was obvious. The physics were impossible to argue with. Vivian had thrown the pan. Alara had blocked it. Silvio turned back to Alara. Where are you really from? He asked. The temperature in the kitchen changed. The guards understood what was happening. The boss was asking a question that went deeper than the surface. He was asking a question that suggested he suspected something fundamental about who was standing in his kitchen. Alara reached into her apron pocket. The guards moved immediately. Their hands went to their weapons. They weren't going to let someone pull anything out of a pocket in front of Silvio. Stop, Alara said. Her voice carried authority, absolute authority. I'm reaching for a USB drive, not a weapon. Let her, Silvio said. From her apron pocket, Alara pulled out a small black USB drive. Her hand was steady as she held it up. Everything in your private vault, she said. Every file, every transaction, every shell company, every documented proof of fraud and murder and sabotage. It's all here. The room went silent. The kind of silence that comes right before the world breaks. My father's name was Marcus Nichols, Alara continued. He owned a logistics company. He died 7 years ago when his brake line was cut. It was made to look like mechanical failure, but it wasn't. And the woman who made it all legal is standing right there. She pointed at Vivian. Vivian's face had gone white. Not pale, white. The color of someone who suddenly understands that their entire world is collapsing. Her signature is on the verification forms, Alara said. The signature that made the fraudulent debt claims legitimate. The signature that created the legal framework for my father's death. I came here to prove it. I came here to make sure the world knew exactly what you both are. Silvio was looking at Alara now with an expression that was impossible to read. And this USB drive, he said carefully. You're saying it contains evidence. It does, Alara said. And it's already been sent. 3 news outlets. Major international newspapers. They're receiving it right now. The story breaks in exactly 45 minutes. Nothing you can do will stop it. Vivian made a sound that was halfway between a scream and a sob. You've destroyed us, she whispered. Alara looked at her. No, she said calmly. You've destroyed yourselves. I just made sure the world could see it. If you're ready for the confrontation that changes everything, subscribe and turn on your notifications because the next chapter is where Silvio makes a choice that nobody expects. He's about to have a private conversation with Alara and Vivian, and what he says is going to determine the fate of his entire empire. Comment below and tell me what you think he's going to do. Is he going to protect Vivian? Is he going to turn her over to the authorities? Or is he going to do something that nobody sees coming? Share your theories. Let's see who understands this man and this story the best. Don't miss the next chapter. The guards left on a single gesture from Silvio. He raised his right hand slightly. They understood. They filed out of the kitchen and closed the door behind them. In the Ravenelli mansion, that door closing meant nobody was getting in or out without permission. 3 people remained in the kitchen now. Silvio, Vivian, Ilera. The oil on the marble floor was still hot enough to smell. The burn mark on Vivian's wrist was turning purple. The burn mark on Ilera's arm was already starting to blister. Silvio walked to the window. He stood there for a long time, looking out at the grounds that he'd spent millions maintaining. Manicured lawns, stone pathways, fountains that ran 24 hours a day to maintain the appearance of perfection. "You came here for revenge," he said. Not a question, a statement delivered as someone who understood how revenge worked because he'd employed it as a tool his entire life. "I came for the truth," Ilera corrected. "Revenge was what I wanted. The truth is what I needed." Silvio nodded. His reflection in the window was calm. His shoulders weren't tense. He looked like a man who was taking information and processing it with the kind of logic that came from decades of managing complex situations. "Your father," he said. "I didn't know him. By the time the situation reached my level, it had already been transformed into something else. A problem, a liability. I gave no direct order. I simply allowed a system to function. That's what makes you more dangerous," Ilera said. "You build a world where you never have to touch the blood yourself." Vivian was still standing near the stove. She was trembling now, not from physical pain, from understanding. She was beginning to comprehend that the structure that had kept her safe was dissolving. "So what happens now?" Silvio turned back to face them both. "You've won. The files are public. They're being read by journalists right now. My empire is about to crumble. My business associates will disappear. The men I've trusted will scatter. You've accomplished exactly what you came here to accomplish." He was looking directly at Ilera now. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Ilera looked at him. For the first time since this began, her certainty seemed to waver. The answer to that question was more complicated than she'd anticipated. "I'll let you live with what you've done," she said finally. "You'll lose everything. Your money, your power, your influence. You'll have years in prison to understand what your convenience cost other people. That's a worse fate than death." Silvio absorbed this without moving. Vivian made a sound. Not words, just a sound that came from somewhere deep in her body. A recognition of what was about to happen. Everything she built through calculation and seduction was about to be destroyed through exposure. Ilera slid the USB drive across the marble counter. It skidded across the stone and stopped in front of Silvio. "That's everything," she said. "Shell companies, fraudulent documents, proof of multiple murders framed as accidents. My father's case is only the beginning. Once people start looking, they're going to find dozens of cases that match the same pattern." Silvio didn't touch the drive. "And you've already sent copies," he said. 3 major news outlets, Ilera confirmed. "The story publishes in 30 minutes. There's nothing you can do to stop it." Vivian collapsed against the counter. Her beautiful face was breaking down. Her certainty was dissolving. She'd spent 3 years existing in this mansion as someone untouchable, someone protected by proximity to power. That protection was gone. In 30 minutes, her signature would be on every news website in the world. In 30 minutes, journalists would begin investigating her connections to Silvio. In 30 minutes, the story of a man's death would intersect with the story of a woman's greed, and she would become the face of organized crime and corruption and the particular kind of evil that comes from prioritizing money over human lives. Silvio looked at the drive. Then he looked at Ilera. "Why did you tell me?" he asked. "You could have just disappeared. Let the story break without warning me." "Because you're going to have a choice," Ilera said. "You can run, try to disappear, lose yourself in countries without extradition treaties, live the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Or you can accept that the system you created requires consequences. Real consequences, not just for Vivian, for you." Silvio smiled, not a real smile. A smile that suggested he was recognizing something in Ilera that he'd recognized in himself years ago. the smile of someone who understands that the game is over. "And what will you do with your freedom?" he asked her. Alara didn't answer immediately. "I don't know yet," she said finally. "That's the part one have to figure out." Silvio nodded. He picked up the drive and turned it over in his hands. Such a small thing, such a small object to contain the entirety of a man's empire crumbling. "When they come to arrest me," he said, "I'm not going to resist." He placed the drive down on the counter. "You've won," he said to Alara. "The real question is whether winning cost you who you were or whether it saved you." By the next morning, everything had changed. The story had broken across every major news outlet. Headlines screamed about corruption and murder and the hidden operations of organized crime. Vivian's photograph appeared on screens around the world. Her signature was highlighted. Her role in Marcus Nichols' death was detailed in excruciating clarity. The authorities arrived at the mansion at dawn. Silvio didn't run. He stood in his living room in a tailored black suit and let them put handcuffs on his wrists. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He simply accepted the inevitable consequences of choices made so long ago they'd become invisible. Vivian was arrested as she was trying to leave in a hired car. The driver was paid off by someone. Everyone assumed it was Silvio, trying to ensure she didn't disappear before facing prosecution. But it might have been Alara. Nobody was entirely sure, and by the time the question mattered, both of them were already gone. Subscribe because the final chapter is coming, and it's going to show you what Alara does with her freedom. It's going to reveal the truth about whether revenge is ever really about justice, or whether it's always about transforming pain into something that can destroy you just as completely as it destroys the people you're targeting. This story changes in the ending. This is where we understand that the real battle wasn't between Alara and Vivian. It was between Alara and herself. Turn on your notifications and share your thoughts. Tell me in the comments what you think happens next. Alara walked out of the Ravenelli mansion at 6 in the morning. The sun was rising over the Italian countryside. The air was cool. The sky was turning from black to purple to gold. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked like the world hadn't just broken open and exposed all of its ugliest parts. She was wearing simple clothes, not the uniform. Simple jeans and a shirt that she'd bought with cash at a small market in the village. Her arm was wrapped in medical tape. The burn was going to scar. The scar was going to be a reminder of this moment for the rest of her life. She didn't feel like she'd won. That was the first surprising realization. She'd spent 3 years planning this moment. 3 years training and preparing and moving through the mansion with absolute certainty about what she wanted to accomplish. She'd confronted Vivian. She'd exposed Silvio. She'd sent the files that were already spreading across the internet like wildfire.